All right. Hey guys, this is Lucy from holisticfitnessconnector.com, and I have Jared Seigler with me today. He is a functional medicine practitioner at Living Proof Institute. And Jared, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what a functional medicine practitioner is?
Yeah. Oh man. The elevator speech, right? No, I'm kidding. So I think like I'm like most people in the sense that I got into this due to either my own health journey or someone that I cared about. So my wife was actually patient zero, and the learning curve was really steep, but she didn't have a cycle for like 5 years. Told she has PCOS. Told that we should just consider adopting kids because we tried all this stuff. And I didn't accept that. And Dr. Patel one night to me said, fix the gut. That's all he said was 3 words. So I was like, okay. I opened up an account the next day with the lab, ran my first stool test ever, did a lot of PubMeding trying to figure out the words I was looking at. But long story short, we killed these parasites and put my wife's body in a good environment. And she had her first cycle the following month. And then we got pregnant, like boom, like that. So that's where I really dawned on me. Her body wasn't making a mistake. It was just doing what it needed to do to survive in the environment that it was in. It was kind of its best course of action. So that's when I thought, wow, this is really neat. Her brother has Crohn's. We saw like dramatic improvement with him. He was able to get off medications, changing his diet, seeing what was happening in the gut. Because a lot of the times when we run into people, they might be on different spectrums. Some people might be living off cheeseburgers. Others are already eating like AIP slash low FODMAP slash they're kind of painting themselves into this food oblivion that they have really hard time getting out of. Anyways, so once we started addressing what happened to that food once it's in the gut, it really started to shine. And so functional medicine, I feel, is the next evolution of the way things have to go with the current healthcare crisis, really, because that's what it is. What we're not seeing anymore is people dying of like malaria and stuff, a lot of these, preventable type diseases. What instead we're dying of is more degenerative type diseases. We're just aging before we actually die, and the quality of life can start to really go down. And functional medicine really, to me, marries with a lot of what we're taught in chiropractic school. Eat well, move well, think well. So we have different environments, the one outside of us, the one inside of our gut, and the one inside of us, our own brain. So do we have good relationships? Do we love our job? Do we work in a moldy environment? Do we live in a moldy environment? All these things we have to consider instead of just test results, because the current approach that people take for their health is that firefighter mentality. You go to the doctor. Most people I've been to, I just spoke with a gentleman that has been to 13 doctors, including a lot of very expensive hospitals and research centers, that everything's fine. And I just say, well, they're just ordering more expensive MRIs. They're not actually doing like what we would consider like a functional neurological evaluation. Like, look, how does this brain actually work?
Yeah.
So that's where, as an adjunct, one thing I learned along the way, on top of doing functional medicine, which is why somebody is sick, not necessarily what they're sick with, but through rehabbing the brain through a process called functional neurology, we can actually increase performance. Because everyone talks about neuroplasticity, and to me that's super exciting, is when we can marry, like, here's a good environment, here's a good thought pattern, movement pattern, exercise for the brain, so to speak. We can really just dramatically change somebody's life.
That's awesome. And the reason I wanted to bring you here is because I run a website where I'm going to be educating coaches or personal trainers. And if you read my why on my website, it talks about, it's called Be the Teacher They Never Had. And kind of like you talked about what you had to figure out with your own wife of healing the gut. In my why, I explain how I grew up with a mom. At the age of 10, I already knew what leaky gut was. I knew that if I got acne, I had a bad gut, and that was my fault. And I did not need Accutane, no fragrances, no chemicals, and basically get to the root cause of disease, heal the gut. And that's how I grew up. Fast forward now, I'm in the fitness industry, and then I'm realizing that people didn't have my mom as their teacher.
Yeah.
And that was a really rude awakening for me. And I'm sure your daughter is going to feel the same way. Her friends' parents did not teach them about sleep, or they didn't teach them about the bad consequences of eating a handful of Tums every day, every time your stomach hurts, things like that. And then so I want to have coaches be those teachers, not just coaches who get people to work out. And my question for you is, when it comes to finding true health, why should coaches look beyond diet and exercise? Like, what are other things they need to be looking at that are big rocks when it comes to finding true health?
Oh, I would say the thing that gets swept under the rug the most would have to be a crappy relationship. It's the elephant in the room. Nobody really wants to talk about it. But whenever I work with somebody, and I encourage every doctor, coach, whatever, when you work with somebody, you want to be transparent and very clear with what you're trying to communicate. And I'll just even tell people, like, we can help you, but we're not going to get the results that we're after if you hate your job, or you and your spouse don't get along anymore. Because there's no pill to forget that maybe you're sharing a bed with somebody you hate or something. I mean, and it can even be that bad. So, you know, I've dealt with RA people where their hand is like totally immobile, and they're like, I want to move these fingers again. And I say, that's probably not going to be possible, because I'd have to break them, because the only way to get that bone is to break, you know, there's a ceiling that lowers the longer somebody's potentially sick. But she would live upstairs and her husband would live downstairs in the basement, and their communication was their daughter, because they couldn't stand talking to each other. But they wouldn't get a divorce and move out due to financial stuff. So that's where we have to think about, man, how did these markers, when we look at all these tests and functional movement patterns, how do they even get this way to begin with? That's really where I think we should put a lot of our focus in. So I just think that's something that kind of gets really, like, not maybe, there's psychiatrists and psychologists, which that's obviously their niche. But I think whenever we talk about, like, oh, brain gut, like, we're trying to do all this cool stuff, when at the end of the day, we're thinking, is this person even in an environment where their body wants to relax? And I think dollar for dollar, that's the best way to try to actually approach somebody's health, is let them know, like, hey, this is a problem, or mold can be a big issue. Here in the Ohio Valley, you know, you're a little bit south of me. I've had people move from one moldy house to another one. The apartment in between had mold. So it's kind of like everywhere. And that's usually dismissed. You know, I'll see a lot of practitioners or patients. They're frustrated, to say the least. But we really just have to, again, like, think of the upstream consequences of what's going on. But the reason coaches, I think, should be more aware of this is they're a huge contact point for people. A lot of people go to commercial gyms. They're there frequently, so it's kind of on a daily basis for people that are going there. And I remember when I was a strength coach, the first gym I worked at, they would have like a pizza night. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you guys are gonna have a pizza night? Like, of all the foods, you couldn't pick anything better. You know, but that was the same gym that fired me for having somebody deadlift, because they were like, oh, they're gonna get hurt. And I'm like, well, that's why they hired me, is so they don't throw their back out while they're doing it. So anyways, you know, just really, because there's that diet and lifestyle. But if we have a negative thought process, that can be up to 30,000 thoughts a day. So,
Wow.
Yeah, tremendous, to say the least.
So relationship or toxic relationships, and then mold. Are there something else? I guess too, not just lifestyle, but for example, gut health. Like, how important is gut health? We have a survey that people fill out before they come in and see us, and we ask questions like, do they get bloated or gassy? Are they waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning because their blood sugar drops?
Yeah.
Few red flags that coaches should pay attention to.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially when someone says I bloat all the time, they're usually already in a stressed out state to begin with. Maybe the last thing you want to do is like have them die sweat angels, like at the end of an hour of like Olympic type lifting 5 days a week or something ridiculous like that. So to me, that's big. When we see dysglycemia and any gut issues, I really start to think like, yes, we want to push the body, but we don't want to push them over necessarily. They're already dealing with a lot metabolically. Actually, before I started working with athletes, I would mainly see a lot of people that would have like heart surgery, CVD patients, and I would see them post-op. So I couldn't do a lot of things that would like raise their blood pressure and very intense, but we would still want to get them doing stuff. So I think it's always important that you try to think of what if someone comes and sees a trainer an hour or like say 1 hour, 3 visits a week. Well, what are they doing the other like 490 hours that week? You can't offset that. So I think at least realizing when someone maybe should make some dietary changes, even if that's outside your scope, just know someone who to hook them up with. But if they're already trying to do the right stuff and it's just not going away, that's where I love what you do is a lot of breath work. Because like I tell people, usually when I see a lot of bloating, what's called a recurring SIBO for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, by the time they see me, they've already been to like 6 or 7 doctors and they've already done antibiotics and all this stuff. And it just comes back because for the most part, their brain isn't talking to their guts. So they're not designed to digest food or promote bowel motility or enzyme secretion. None of that stuff is designed to happen. So I would always make sure people would leave the gym cold is what I would say. Yes, we just did this, but we need to get you tapped back into those kind of parasympathetics before you just go back out in traffic, have to deal with the kids, worry about your post-workout shake, blah, blah, blah. So really allowing someone to have that time to be able to chill, recognize that you want to push people in the right direction without pushing them too far. So if they feel bad after you're training them, you're not doing them any favors. Yeah, people, it's good when they're like shaky, their legs are shaky and they're trying to put their keys in their car and they're like, they're like done. It's always kind of cool, but even when I first started, I thought they're never going to want to come back to the gym. I just made them hate this place. And metabolically, we know it's not really what we do in the gym that gets us our gains. It's how we sleep and how we eat, how we recover from what we just did is where our body truly adapts and responds. So I think understanding that as a trainer, you're creating a stimulus, but the real benefit is the body's ability to respond to that stimulus. I think is where we can really get the most ground working with people.
Yes. And you mentioned the next question, which is sleep. I mean, how many trainers really ask their clients about sleep? Because for years, I thought I did. For 5 years, I thought I was promoting good sleep just by saying, hey, are you getting your sleep? But now I'm learning about light exposure and blocking light and food timing and just really truly regulating that circadian rhythm takes more than just, hey, are you getting 8 hours?
Yeah. And that doesn't constitute sleeping until noon the next day or something.
Exactly. I thought, because I've always gotten 8 hours. So just like that's another thing that trainers, I think, are totally overlooking. I mean, I want to build a business on helping clients sleep because I feel like if we did that, so many other things would work themselves out. It's just so underrated.
Oh, it truly is. I mean, whether I'm dealing with people on the spectrum like Parkinson's or whatever, something, the end result of them, they're like, I want this to stop. And I say, well, for this to happen, you have to poop good every day and sleep good every night first. Like that's going to be the foundation with which we can build on that part of the brain to try to stop this. But yeah, sleep is really probably if the one thing I think you could help somebody do outside of the gym, sleeping well is probably the best one.
Yeah.
Just because that's the only time you actually recharge. And we know now there's more about blue light exposure and things. And I think that's really important. A lot of people are like mouth taping and stuff like that. But for a lot of people, if they've been in a chronic stress response, sometimes, believe it or not, their brain can actually have trouble sensing that circadian rhythm. Because like the hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that helps us remember why we walked into a room. Who am I going to call when I pick up my phone? Well, that's kind of the brakes for what's called the HPA axis. It's supposed to sense that cortisol and say something like, oh, Lucy's already dealt with stress. And then it kind of shuts it down and the adrenals are like, okay, the orders are done. We're not going to make any more. But you can burn that part of the brain out. When people talk about plasticity, that might not always be the best thing if you're going down like a bad pathway in the brain. And the way the neurons work, if you fire too much and work it too much through exercise, you'll kill it. So it's kind of like, you know, when you see people like maybe making their clients do like 1 billion freaking crunches, you're not really doing them any favors. You're just like reinforcing a bad motor pattern until eventually that pattern is like solidified now in that person. Well, with the neuron, as we're trying to reinforce that pattern, is these neurons fire. If they can't kind of metabolically keep up, they actually kind of explode. So these are the people that when you're trying to maybe work with them, I use the cerebellum a lot for core. As you know, it's a big regulator. Core strength isn't necessarily like how good your abs look. But when I see people like doing that ratcheting, like they're trying to slowly control down and they're like ratcheting back and forth, I'm like, man, we made this 2 seconds. It's not a muscular thing. I was like, your brain can't control like your core. So then I start to wonder about like, you know, neurological control of a lot of stuff. Because as you know, strength is usually actually how efficient is somebody at a movement. Because of course, you know, you look at like the old saying is there's a 15-year-old girl in China warming up with your max, you know, meaning, yeah, you might be able to do that, but there's genetically gifted people that are just, boom, very good, like triple body weight squats, stuff like that. Which as mere mortals, we're like, man, that's some good numbers. Anyways, so all that to say, kind of going off on a tangent, like just like we don't want to exercise maybe somebody's muscles too much, we might want to only stimulate the brain in a way they can in the way they can handle. I always tell people, you know, if I push you too hard, I'll just push you over, and I really don't want to do that. But all that, you know, kind of backing up towards the whole sleep thing, your brain is actually trying to do so much that there's a ton of energy expenditure. If you were awake during what happens during sleep, you'd be exhausted because your liver and your brain are trying to do like tremendous amounts of work right now. So I think that's really kind of something that we need to go back to, that hippocampus, putting someone in a state of relaxation. Most people don't even know how to relax to fall asleep. You know, we have to like teach their brain how to chill out again. They'll try to watch TV to distract themselves. So these are the people, they have the TV going while they're looking at their phone. And finally, after enough time, they just like collapse from sheer exhaustion. And there's a difference between being unconscious and being asleep. You know, people that don't wake up refreshed, I'll be like, hey, how's your sleep? They're like, oh, good, I fall asleep fine. I'm like, how do you wake up? You feel good in the morning? They're like, no, still tired. I'm like, so let's try this again. How's your sleep? Like some people just think, oh, this is the way it is because they just adapt to poor sleep. And I think, you know, I love to sleep like a champ. To me, that was always the biggest thing. When I was a power lifter, we wouldn't even go to parties or anything on the weekends. I'd probably be asleep by like 9:30 after I just ate like a 1,500 calorie before bed meal type thing. So
sleep is my #1 priority. And when you say pushing over, like what does that look like? So if a coach doesn't understand functional medicine or doesn't understand the functional medicine approach, and they don't learn how to look at sleep or the gut health, or even if there's mold in the house, like what can they might run into if they keep pushing people hard?
oh man, easiest thing right out of the gate, injuries. You're going to injure your clients. If you keep tearing them down in the gym, you're not building them up every day. You're actually tearing them down a little bit more and a little bit more. They're not going to be able to recover. And you'll start to see it in their training. You know, they'll maybe plateau in their volume. Maybe if we're trying to do like an intensity type thing, we can realize, man, you know, you're up actually 3 minutes from like this escalated density training or whatever program you have them on. And you'll just start to notice like they get winded, they're gassed, they're not recovering, they're going to complain more. Things are going to be more creaky and poppy and stuff like that. They'll probably actually get usually sick. They might start canceling more because that stress is going to suppress the immune system. So then they're just more susceptible to whatever's going around at the office or whatever else maybe somebody brought into the gym anyways. Because I've always wondered who cleans all those bars and stuff at the end of the day. Probably nobody. So, you know, because it's anyways, so that's kind of some of the things I would start to look out for is like, hey, Jan, or the worst thing, that usually a lot of people want to lose that abdominal fat and they actually gain more. I see so many patients that say, yeah, I tried to go to a trainer and we went to a class and I got more abdominal fat. And I'm like, yeah, that's your cortisol, that's your stress, like you're taxing your adrenals even worse. And as a trainer, I don't try to tell anyone how to work with their clients as a broad statement. I'll just say like, then, hey, knock the intensity back, give them a little more rest, maybe drop a few sets at the end. They should still feel like they did something, but they shouldn't feel like they can't recover, and they should want to come in. Usually when I deal with people that are having that types of issues, was when I was a trainer, I would make sure they left with a little bit left in the tank. They might even be saying like, that's it, that's all we're going to do today. And I'd be like, yep, that's all we're going to do today. Like, you did great. Just make sure you get some good sleep tonight, pick you up on Friday, and we'll go from there, you know? So yeah, just kind of reinforcing that, but really knowing what to look for, like that questionnaire. If they're just not sleeping, they shouldn't feel exhausted or lightheaded, have headaches and abdominal fat gain and stuff after working with the trainer.
Yeah, what are a few other questions you think people can ask that they can see as red flags? For example, to me, acne. Acne,
Yeah.
or skin gut axis is just, or the connection to that. What are a few other things that people can start looking?
Other than skin is a big one. Skin health's a reflection of gut health. I did 2 rounds of Accutane. So I didn't have my mom able to tell me that sort of stuff. I was raised conventionally. So all that stuff didn't work. Thank God my liver's like doing fine. Oh, thank God. So, you know, skin is huge. I would honestly say the biggest thing I see most people is anxiety. Fatigue is a big one, but most people are keyed up these days to begin with. Usually one of the big things I'll have someone do is I'll say, hey, just hold your hand steady. Just let me see if you can sit there, and even just hold your hand steady. And people will be like trembling, like they're just sitting there and you can see these little fine tremors. And to me, that's like one of those external signs of like, wow, either the brain can't regulate unwanted motion, like they have a cerebellar issue, or they have so many stress hormones just coursing through their veins, they don't even know they're stressed. Nails are a big one too. Nails, teeth, and eyes are like a window into someone's like metabolic status. If you're like, because if you're going to buy a horse, you're like picking up the gums, you're looking at the teeth, you're looking at the poop of that animal. That's a big one.
So the health of or how healthy their nails are and how healthy their teeth are.
Yeah, that too. And plus, you know, I would say honestly, look at your poop if you're watching this. Ask them about it too. Don't be TMI, be like, hey, because you should know that stuff about your clients. It wasn't foreign to me because I would talk about it. But you know, if you've had like a workout buddy, it's like a marriage where you're like, you know everything about that person, what they ate for lunch, what was their macros, blah, blah, blah. But I tell people, just look at your poop. If you have any problems pooping, like it's too hard, it's too soft, bloating, anything, that IBS is probably the crappiest label they just try to throw at people. Like, oh, we don't know what's wrong, it's something, but you don't have Crohn's or like acid reflux, so we don't really know what to do. Which is frustrating to say the least. So I would say anything there, the ability to, just stay calm, and regulating mood is a big one too. Usually what I ask people is, how can you handle a stress? What happens if you do miss a meal? That's really important, because when we think about stress, like back to blood sugar, regulating that can be one of the biggest stresses on the body. Everybody loves to fast now. Everyone's like, oh, intermittent fasting. I've only had water for the past 9 days. And I'm like, if you're already stressed out, that might not be the best thing for you. Because that's a huge metabolic stress, is regulating that. So I would just see, how do people feel, you know, if you, hey, say you're late for dinner, are you like wifezilla or something, where like your husband and kids are like cowering in fear because mom got hungry or whatever, which I know we laugh about it, but it can be really bad when people's organs don't work and can't regulate stuff. Skin is good. Farts shouldn't stink real bad. I mean, obviously it's not going to smell great, but you know, really looking at poop, I think, is probably the number one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have on our intake how many times they go to the
Right.
bathroom. We've only
Have a
had
nice
2 clients say,
have
I'm
a
not
nice
answering it.
Bristol chart on the wall. Be like, are you a 3 or a 4? Halfway in between. That's what we're aiming for.
That's a
Right.
good, I'm going to do that. That's a
Yeah.
really
Well,
good idea.
it's really good. I just tell people, like, without being too graphic, I say it should be uniform in color and consistency. It should be easy to get out, and it should sink to the bottom without being a race. Like,
Hmm.
that's kind of like what you call a loaf, right? That's basically it. That's what you're after. If you can do that every day or a couple times a day, things are probably working pretty good down there for that to happen.
Awesome. That's great. And to the last topic, which I think personal trainers, coaches are in a really good position because they get to see a lot of people and they
Mhm.
get to see them often. And those people can see people or know people, and it can spread. Right now, our society's health is definitely going down down the stream, and it's or going down. And I think a big reason why it's because how uneducated most people are when it comes to seeing the future. Like, I think a lot of people think that whatever happens to a child's health when it's young is not going to affect them when they're older. Like, I've heard people say, I let my child eat all the fat and sugar she wants, and when she's older, she can decide if she wants to be healthy. And being raised like my mom raised me, like, I don't see that. My mom told me my gut health was that I needed that if I
Yes.
wanted to be healthy in the future, or if I had acne now, that in the future it's going to turn into something else. Or if I had one autoimmune disease as a kid, it's going to turn into worse. Like, whatever's happening as a kid, it will affect the adult life.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out, like, how can I educate parents to look at these red flags just like a personal trainer would look at their red flags, like acne and getting
Hmm.
angry and all these little things. It's like, what can a
Yes.
parent start looking at?
Oh man, for parents, a couple red flags. When they always have little red cheeks, back to the skin health, their gut is inflamed. Like, I can guarantee it. I don't need to run a stool test. I mean, we will because we want to figure out why. You can't, that fix the gut, those 3 words, when people are like, oh, my doctor told me to fix the gut. And I'm like, you have any idea what that could possibly entail?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I say if we see these rosy red cheeks, if we have a lot of nasal, like there's nose runs all the time, allergies are a bad sign. That means the immune system can't handle grass. Like 90% of the earth that's land is covered in grass.
So
So,
seasonal allergies, something that's super
oh,
common.
oh yeah, that's the precursor. That means you have histamine stuff, which is an immune imbalance, but the histamine's like a grenade. It'll just start pummeling the gut lining. If you want a leaky gut, just keep up like, don't worry about your seasonal allergies for about 3 to 5 years. Those things typically precede a leaky gut by like 3 to 5 years. So when I see a kid with allergies that just started, I think, we still have time before really bad stuff maybe starts to happen.
Mm.
Um, so the nose running is a big one. Really, when I see a lot of kids, poor impulse control is number one. The personal space, the volume, that prefrontal cortex probably isn't developing the way it should, so they can't inhibit a lot of things.
Mm.
So they're the rowdy kids, the ones that maybe are fidgety, they're too loud. You'll see them at the playground. They'll just like run up in your face and start screaming like right here. That part of the brain that's like, hey, don't do that. That just doesn't work, and we can't blame them. Unfortunately, what happens is we try to drug the kids way out of it. 1 in like 6 kids is diagnosed with ADD now. Overall, if you just look at like pre-diabetic, ADD, something is going on with them. Allergies, like 1 out of 2 kids has something. 50% of our kids is. So when I look at my daughter, I think personally, I'm almost giving her an unfair advantage with what we're teaching her and the way we're raising her. Because nobody knows. Like, the pediatrician sure as crap isn't saying this, which I don't know why.
Yeah.
But they're saying usually the same thing. Diet doesn't matter. Let your kid eat whatever they want. They're just a kid. It's a lollipop. Like, are you kidding me right now? There's things called fractals. And the way their health is going as a kid, that's going to extrapolate the way their health is going to look when they get older. Things aren't going to get better. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but if you like keep letting a kid unbeknowingly, like either the parents doing it or the kid themselves is doing it, or the school is allowing that type of thing to happen, it's going to get a lot worse. Like what we know now with Alzheimer's, it's expected to bankrupt the country in like the next 5 years.
Wow.
So when everyone talks about people retiring, I talk about people thinking like they're going to need nursing homes. Like our generation, me and you, 1/5 of us is expected to have a neurodegenerative disorder by the time we're like 55 and 60. We're not even supposed to be old.
Wow.
Yeah. The scary thing is autism is raising at the same rate as Alzheimer's. So that's where when gross motor control is big. Are they always clumsy? Do they hold their pen funny? Telling Tommy to hold it like this isn't going to fix that. His brain can't integrate that kind of fine motor control. So as a trainer, I would say look for like, can a kid do a jumping jack? And that's like a very basic thing, like President's Fitness test, right? But you see these kids and their brain can't coordinate both sides, upper and lower extremities. You'll see writing dysfunction. I mean, the cheeks will be red, or they'll have runny noses, or they'll have behavioral issues. But those are kind of like the beginning red flags. And usually with the kids, it's kind of the same things with adults. Usually a lot of GI issues. They're giving 6-month-olds like Zantac 75. Like,
Wow.
that's insane. I'm like, show me the double-blind, placebo, randomized control trial that had a bunch of 6-month-olds taking a medication like that. We're basically shutting off digestion in a child that's already having trouble digesting stuff. I don't know if necessarily that's the smartest or first step we should use. So there'll be a lot of gut dysfunction. Rashes are huge with a lot of kids. Back to the allergies. They're always sensitive to something. Usually they can't do a lot of peanuts. Hint, hint. That's because peanut oil is in vaccines. If it's kids in Europe, so the vaccines in Europe have sesame oil in them, and guess what people are allergic to over there? Sesame, not peanuts. So then I jokingly say, if the industry wanted to make people sensitive to coconut oil, just start using that in vaccines, and nobody will be able to eat coconut oil anymore. So anyways, and that's a whole nother thing, you know, not to bat at the vaccine hornet nest. But when I grew up, I got like 5 or 6 shots in 5 years. Nobody's ever looked at what do we do when we have 52 shots the first 6 years of life. This is literally a giant petri dish. There's new chemicals that have only been legal since 1995 in our country, glyphosate and Roundup. Huge for brain function, overall health function. The new vaccine schedule has been only that way since 2013. So that's only got 5 years to go now. So finally kids are starting to, that just started that, are starting to see the end of that. And something when we talk about autoimmune diseases, everyone seems to forget the fact that when we're provoking the immune system with something like a vaccine, for someone with autoimmune genes, that might be their trigger. But we might not see it for like a decade or so later. Like just a few weeks ago in Nature, which is hopefully everybody watching this knows about Nature. It's probably one of like the best research publications you can be part of. They showed that, hey, Hep B shots cause MS. And they were like, also, hey, HPV shots, what we call Gardasil, that can trigger POTS and lupus in women. So yeah, I think they can take a Gardasil shot, or we can just have them do yearly pap smears because it's such a slow-growing cancer, it'll catch it every stinking time. And maybe this girl isn't coming to my office in a wheelchair because she had to drop out of college because she got the shot to go to college, and now she can't even live her life and she's stuck at home because she has an autoimmune disease where she can't even regulate blood pressure and she stands up and falls out. Fun times, right? So that's where I say it's really not fair because nobody's ever done all these studies to look at all these things at once. Like even when we look at, say, the chemical in this ink, the company that made the chemical for the ink, they only had to publish the safety data sheets on the most active chemical, not all the chemicals combined. And when research, like independent labs have started to look at, and I'm using ink as an analogy, when they're like, well, let's look at all the ingredients of the ink, they found that synergistically they can have 1,000-fold more of a toxic effect, which now we're talking 1,000%, which is another zero, which that's times 100,000, which means that like raises like this. From a statistics standpoint, that's insane. And I say, and nobody's asked the questions. I think it's really ridiculous we haven't at this point. I know we're supposed to be talking about training and functional medicine.
It has to be, if no, I mean, no one else is talking about it, which is why I think personal trainers are in that position, because I talk to my clients about it, or at least that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, and it's, things are out of my scope, but that's why I have Terry Wall's, that's why I have books, and then medicine books, because someone has to bring these things up, because their doctor's not telling them, and someone has to bring up this world, or at least introduce them to this information.
Yeah. Like, and that's where, from when parents taking care of kids, I say the best thing you can probably do is just make sure they eat home cooked meals. I know that might be a pain or whatever. You can find a million excuses, but just make real food for your kids. Something that simple, easy and simple don't always correlate. But I say, just try that. You might be really shocked whenever they don't live off of like Pop-Tarts or whatever kids eat. And I eat that stuff for breakfast. That's okay. But I just want to teach my daughter what I know, and I want her to be better than me. So hopefully she'll raise her kids to know more than I do, because I can't teach somebody what I don't know. But then I say, yeah, strategic changes I think can be really good. And definitely trainers bringing it up. Just, of course, we don't want to cower in fear, like, hey, this math that you're on, nobody's ever done any safety studies on all the chemicals in it combined. You know, then people are going to freak out. But actually just being aware, like back to my wife, they thought, oh, think about, you know, adopting. A lot of people force a pregnancy. And I think I understand where somebody's coming from. Trust me. The best part of my day is like hugging my daughter when I get home. So I get that. But I say then genetically, I think about things logically, because I'm real left brain. I think we have a genetically susceptible child in the most challenging environment, genetically speaking, that we've ever encountered. So now we've kind of done, in my opinion, that child a disservice, because we've kind of put them behind the 8 ball on, well, the reason they can't deal with grass is because they got to deal with all this other crap, and their immune system's finally just like, whatever, I can't take this anymore, you know? So to me, that's kind of something I always think about too, like, hey, you know, because I see a lot of women that want to come see me to have children, because they relate to our story. And I just say, I'm never going to force you to become pregnant. I just want to focus on health, and then allow your body to become pregnant if it wants to, if it feels it's a good time. Yeah, so because we really have to change our children's trajectory, because I think honestly, because the way things are raising is kind of like this bell curve. So back to that, I think our society is going to be vastly different in the next 5 to 10 years. Just because the wave is coming, I think a lot of doctors and trainers are starting to see it. You look around and you just kind of think, wow, this is more common than I used to see stuff like this. But then if we're still raising exponentially with a lot of our diseases, I think, well, then what's 5 years going to look like? Now when these 5-year-olds are 10-year-olds and we have a new batch of 5-year-olds, how sick are they going to be in 5 years? Yeah. So anyways, long story short.
No, that's good. So the rashes, the impulse issues, like how does that look later on? Like, is that going to, or what does it look like later on in your, from your experience?
Well, if we have these allergies and the gut starts leaking, the IBS symptoms typically precede bad things about 7 to 10 years. So that's now things can't be contained anymore and it's seeping elsewhere. Really, at the end of the day, this is going to be a lot more medications for people, chronic ones. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset. Now that's happening younger and younger. So we're going to see a lot of more of the medication management side of things. But if a kid can't maybe do things that we expect of their brain in the 5th grade or whatever, they're not going to be able to adult too well either. So I personally, I jokingly say, if you want to see someone's brain health, just watch them drive in traffic. Are they always lost? Do they just seem like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? Um, anyways, it's only, there's things called fractals, and that's where things will kind of multiply the way they're already going. So if the brain doesn't develop, it'll degenerate even faster. So that's where I really start to wonder, well, you know, if kids, like, for example, have digital dementia, they never had to remember a phone number because their phone always did it. Well, if we never built that part of the brain up, how fast is that going to break down now? We don't know that yet. So Harvard and really big schools are trying to figure that out, because it's like the scariest prospect of anyone is like a neurodegenerative disease. Because, you know, we can give people new hearts and stuff. Right now, we can't give new brains, kind of. I do want stem cell injections put in my brain. So seriously, they use your own stem cells. I figure in the next 10 years, it'll be cheaper technology and better. But yeah, why not? Because that's what we know is really going to be the rate limiting thing for a lot of people, is can their brain keep up with doing everything that it is designed to do. So.
Nice. And what can a parent do if you do see, because you talked about cooking, and or not just a parent, just anyone. You get someone, for example, if I got someone and they were having blood sugar issues, they were always bloated, they had IBS, only diagnosed by a conventional doctor, and they are on medication, and they have rosacea, you know, they have a rosacea or psoriasis, some skin condition, obviously out of the scope to help them. You can help them, like guide them in the right direction by getting them to work on their sleep, by getting them to chew their food. So there's things that the personal trainer should be able to do.
Yeah.
But how do they start with functional medicine, and how does that process look like, and why is it worth it? Because in my eyes, it's worth it. Like,
yeah.
So you don't go on a vacation this year, because in my heart, it's like it's totally worth it if you just help your kid now when your kid is 3 with all these issues, instead of when they're 17. But they don't really see that. So how does the functional medicine process work, and why is it worth it?
Yeah, well, the way it works is at that point it's more of an investment. Because, like, for example, a brother-in-law getting off of Crohn's medication that costs $3,000 a month after insurance, that was the best money he ever spent. Like, it saved him a couple $100,000 at this point. So really, what I think it's a psychological thing. We're taught to think, oh, I have health insurance. So basically, like, oh, I have car insurance. I don't need to buckle up while I drive. Like, are you kidding me? So that's where, like, yeah, I have health insurance. That's good for if I get hit by a bus outside there. But it's not really helping me actually become healthy. That's what insurance won't pay for. So I think there's a big disconnect thinking, well, my insurance doesn't cover it, so why do I have to pay for this? And I say, well, you still buy new tires even though you have car insurance. You're not going to, like, run them bald and then slam into a pole or something. But to me, I think it's just, it makes total sense, I think, to people like us, because we get it. Because if you can address why somebody is sick and really teach them what they need to do to be healthy, it's just so much better. Like our process, we actually have a 46-page intake packet, because that's where I say I get to hear your story. Nobody's going to tell me what's going on better than you. I have to listen to you. So instead of, here's your type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, Hashimoto's protocol, what's the Lucy Hendricks protocol? What are you telling us? What is the testing telling us? From somebody really talking to us, what we do is then figure out what testing have you done, what testing has been missed, so that way we can kind of look below the waterline and see what's really going on here, and how can we address that. To me, diet and lifestyle is the main thing. I just tell people straight up, you're going to be the one that gets better. Dr. Seigler's not going to help your tremor go away. You're going to do it. I'm going to teach you how, though. So that way you know what exercise you have to do, the way you have to eat, why this happened to begin with. So if we can really get to that and change, especially the trajectory of a child's life, I think it's just so tremendous. And that process, it looks a little bit different just because most of the time we try to give like power back to the patient. Like I'm not going to give somebody something to help them sleep if they're watching the news before they go to bed. I'll be like, just quit watching something stressful on a blue light thing with EMF first. And if you still have trouble sleeping, okay, let's do that. So usually by the time people see me, they've already maybe spoken to someone like you. I'm already trying to exercise. I'm already trying to eat right. I'm already trying to do this right stuff, but I'm just not getting traction. Like I have patients that admittedly eat cleaner than me. You know, everything's under a microscope, but they're really sick. They're not getting the benefits of that, like, let me micromanage my diet. So that's where we kind of went to really let the testing shine, but then interpret like, well, this is what we need to do about it and things like that.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know if enough people are doing it yet, in all honesty. Like we like, you know, like you mentioned, Dr. Walsh, or sorry, yeah,
Well,
so, yeah, Dr. Walsh. So, you know, we know who she is, but if you went to the mall and asked 1,000 people who she is, 1,000 people won't know who she is.
yeah.
So it's just, nobody knows it's out there yet, which is the problem because like, I'll even name the hospital. This guy went to Johns Hopkins and he loves functional medicine. He's a believer, but he's like, how come they're not doing it? And I say, I don't know. You know, like you'd have to ask them because what they do is, yeah, it's covered by insurance, but that's not really the scope of what I will allow somebody. I just say I'm not going to allow some kid on the 12th story of a building that doesn't know anything about health or you tell me what to do to get you to feel better.
Yeah.
That's like the height of passing the buck to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, that's great.
Yeah. So anyways, that's kind of the whole shebang. I say just, yeah, we start with a real thorough history, which I think is necessary. What people might call functional testing. I also do a thing called functional neurology. So that's where basically a personal trainer for the brain. How can we activate certain parts and rehab that? So to me, it's a perfect marriage because then if we can give that kid's part of the brain, like exercise, like, hey, don't punch Eric in class every day. If we can get those neurons to just kind of turn on doing something else, then maybe he won't hit him that day. And then we're like, hey, this kid's behavior got better. And we're like, wow. And everyone's like, wow. And I say, it didn't take a drug. So yeah, anything else though? Sorry, I know I ramble.
No, that was, I mean, that's how my mom got started. My brother had learning disability and teachers would put him on medication and they would get a call, hey, your kid's on top of the chairs again on the table. And it's like, well, did you give him candy?
Yeah.
Yes. Don't give them candy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll see kids with autism and they're like in occupational therapy and they're like, oh, they bribe them with Doritos. And I'm like, oh my God, like, can one person work with me here? You know, anyways, so it can be frustrating. But that's just where, you know, we talk about like a separation of wealth in these generations. I honestly think there's a separation in health and it's becoming more and more apparent. The people that know kind of these secrets, so to speak, man, the way their health is going is on a vastly different trajectory than maybe things that aren't going 100% ideal. And I know it's not everybody's fault. Everyone's on their own journey. I did a lot of things looking back. I think, wish I wouldn't have done that. But, you know, I think someone only makes a mistake when they know better and they keep doing it anyways. I think that's the true problem sometimes.
Oh, awesome. And where can coaches, because I know you put a lot of things on Facebook, like the Living Proof Facebook group. Where can they go find you? And where can
we have the Living Proof community page, which is over 5,000 members now. We actually have a page. I have my own personal Facebook page. I'm nerdy. I just try to throw research and things out there. Our website's becomeproof.com. Lot of effort went into making that website what it is. And so we value, and same with you, transparency. Like, I think we're probably the only doctor's office that just lists their price right on the website and things like that. So, you know, that's where when people say like, I'll just throw it out there, when people are like, wow, that's a lot of money for my RA. And I say, well, you're not paying me per hour. You're paying me for your joints to work again. Like, you're paying for the result. Like, basically So if I can do that shorter and easier, to me, that's a lot better than like doling it out over all this time and things. Because people want to feel better fast, you know?
I'm going to use that line now. That's a great one.
Yeah, yeah, because I even had this one doctor. He was like, "Oh wow, that's what you charge per hour." I was like, "Well, sorry." I was like, "But people are paying me for results, not for like the surgery I just gave them in front of them. Like that's per service type thing." Yeah, so just a different thought process and everything. So
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you, Jared.
you're welcome. Have a great day, Lucy. Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, and I'll just stay recording. Bam. How terrible was that?